What's a good word? Yeah, so we're continuing our scouting breakdown of the 2023 New York Jets Undrafted Free Agent class, and then probably the most polarizing and well-known prospect out of this group, safety Trey Dean III. This guy's really interesting, actually. There's a lot of people that have a lot to say about him and what his tenure at Florida looked like. So we'll dive into some of the highlights here. 6'2", 200 pounds. So he's already ahead of the mold in terms of there was a lot of hype about us selecting a guy like Brian Branch, especially when we seen he was falling into the second round. And a lot of the pushback with him being a round one prospect, speaking about Brian Branch, was that he didn't hit the 200-pound threshold. So being a little bit lighter, you have concern about him having an injury. Not the same with Trey Dean here. He started off his career with Florida as a cornerback in his first season, and then he ended up making a switch to safety to continue to see the field and kind of progress within his defense, kind of holding out hopes that he'd be able to transfer back to cornerback after having a pretty strong season. So needless to say, the versatility is there. They put him at corner. They put him at free safety, strong safety. They've even played him as a rover linebacker. And I even seen a couple snaps at, the defensive line position. So a guy that's been able to kind of see it all, do it all. Not necessarily at an elite level for all of these spots, but you still like the fact that he has the understanding of what you need to do for each of those positions. Best position long term, most likely going to be strong safety. We'll get into it when we kind of talk about what he does well versus what he does bad. And at least over the 5 seasons he's had, I want to say it was about 34 starts overall. He's had just about 3,000 snaps of experience. So you love to see those kind of things. But again, full picture, there's a reason why he's ultimately an undrafted free agent, although a pretty hyped one. Struggled throughout his career, but one thing to take note of, to give him his credit, is he had the cleanest stretch of games, his final 6 games of this 2022 season, where he finally looked like he was kind of piecing everything he's slowly been learning together over that 6-game period. As far as him being invited to the Shrine Bowl, I did find it interesting that he was one of the few players, Bill Belichick's not known for this, but he got praise from him around the practice time for the Shrine Bowl, and then, of course, what he was able to do in the Shrine Bowl as well. And from what I saw, generally his best plays, which is why I say he's probably going to be suited to strong safety, seem like they come anywhere from the line of scrimmage to about 12 yards out, where the farther you go with a guy like this, the wider route or the farther back he's playing, right? Which is why I don't see him as a free safety. You start to lose things like route recognition, depth recognition, being able to make the plays. You see some questioning from him, different things like that. So that's what we're looking at here, potentially a strong safety of the future for us. Keep in mind, before we get into kind of his strengths and opportunities here, that we're looking at our safety position. Tony Adams really the only guy that's locked down beyond a year, I believe. And then you have Jordan Whitehead. We're hoping for kind of that bounce back season from him. And then behind him, you do have a more proven commodity in Chuck Clark, but both on a 1-year contract. So this could be a guy that we prep in the background, maybe an early special teams role. We're trying to fill him in behind Tony Adams. Who knows? But what is he going to bring to the table? So coming off a 2022 season, 81 tackles, 4 pass deflections, a half a sack. He's done fairly well prior to this season, actually. So it's not like he's necessarily a stat sheet stuffer. But you see him consistently be able to get his hands out there in terms of pass deflections. He recorded at least an interception in the prior 4 seasons before this. And so he's generally around the ball, but making the plays is one of the things you want to see more out of him. So strengths, when you want to talk about kind of his leadership, productivity, things like that, he did lead his team in 2021 in tackles, where it's interesting because he's generally known as a guy that it really is boom or bust. I said that with a lot of people so far, but either he was one of the main people making plays during the game, or he was a huge component of coverage bust, miscues, miscommunication, all sorts of things that were going wrong with him. So glad to see that there was some kind of established parameter for him when it comes to being able to go and get involved in plays. Capable running with targets downfield. I know a lot of what's going to be the fallback option for him is he's not quick because he had a 4.75 yard, 40-yard dash, but you see him definitely play a lot quicker on film, especially when he is closer to the line of scrimmage, where that doesn't necessarily matter so much. You see a lot of that burst and explosion that he was able to show in other elements of his combine. Should be able to match with big tight ends. This is why you really want to see him at strong safety. He has strong man coverage ability, so you like to see that 6'2" frame go out there and be able to handle some of those tight ends that against anybody else are going to have, you know, anywhere between 5 and 8 inches of an advantage over him. With Trey Dean, you kind of mitigate that a lot more. He's able to kind of get into some of those jump ball situations with them, and he's going to be a lot stickier against some of those guys. Poor ball, should be able to match with the big tight ends, as we mentioned. Capable of playing man in the slot. A lot of people liked what his film showed with him being able to go out there and cover slot receivers or a tight end that's lined up out there. You'd also ideally like to see him be able to handle running backs that maybe are going out there and handling wheel routes, running out to the flats, different things like that. Utilizes his long arms to assist in breaking passes, so he's aware of generally how to get the most out of his frame when he's making a play on the ball. Has an excellent understanding of run play concepts and how to attack downhill, so you love the fact that as a run fit defender, he's going to be able to dominate the line of scrimmage for the most part and kind of go out there and impose his will. And due to that, you've seen some things where there's hit stick ability, right? To go back to some Madden terms, he can definitely go out there and hammer and nail a few people into the ground when he finally gets everything to stack up correctly. Pretty strong, good tackling radius. The long arms and everything definitely works to his favor. Fluid hips, and then we spoke about the solid man coverage ability and what he can do versus tight ends, what he can do out of the slot, and just in general in terms of being a strong safety and keeping things in front of you within 10 to 15 yards. He should be very, very effective in that range. Now, what were some of the things that made him polarizing, right? We already broke it off a little bit with the poor 40 time, the 4.75 that he ran in the 40-yard dash. You hope to really mitigate this. I mean, he has the versatility to go out there and be a high safety. He can be a cornerback. Again, we've seen him running with some people, but still, you do have the concerns there about why was he running a time anywhere close to 4.7s, right? You don't see those outliers generally have success, so you hope that maybe it's just a freak accident, a guy that didn't perform well, and he's going to be able to work around that kind of issue. He needs more awareness with coverage responsibilities. We dived into this as well. He was a guy that was generally known in the Florida defense as being the main reason that there were coverage miscues, miscommunications, busted coverages. If there was a big play and Trey Dean was in the vicinity, you could generally point to him as being the guy that caused it. And I heard a lot of coaches and some of the scouts that reviewed him actually call out the fact that he's not very talkative in terms of working with his teammates in order to shore up the coverage, which maybe is the biggest point of contention for him and something that generally should be easier to fix than not. But that's something I'm curious if the coaching staff will be able to kind of coax out of him and figure out why exactly is that he wasn't able to do that effectively. He needs to take better angles to the football carrier. A lot of times you see him overrunning himself out of being able to get a 100% tackle. You end up running yourself out of the play, and suddenly you got a guy that's going out there for 10, 15 yards. And so that's a little bit disappointing. It pops up frequently enough on tape that you get concerned. Poor ball location skills, at least when his back is turned to the quarterback. Now, I usually try to give leeway because, 7 out of 10 people, that would be a problem for. But at his length, the amount of time he's been able to do this as a safety and then also having a cornerback background, you'd think that this would be at least something he breaks even, if not more of a strength on his tape. But you just don't see it. So Ideally, again, as a strong safety, you mitigate a lot of that because you're keeping his eyes in the backfield on his assignment, and so you don't really have to worry about that as much. Needs to be more patient, especially in like a phone booth situation, or if he's working through traffic. With this kind of ties into the tackling angles issue where he's running himself out of plays. He just kind of wants to get in there, and it's almost like his instincts aren't necessarily always correct. He rather, if he sees ball, he gets ball. It's very it's not the most dynamic thinking, right? But you do see a lot of these kind of issues where if he lets some of the guys in front of him do a little bit more of the work, let the running back end up, making an error with whatever hole he's going to hit, etc., you would see a little bit better of a situation for him there. Impatience and inconsistency overall are going to be the biggest factors outside of the communication concerns with Trey Dean. Something that I don't think is necessarily the worst thing ever, right? You see all of the actual traits that you will want out of a safety, and even a guy that you can place in there as like cornerback 5. But you see all of the traits, you just don't see them done consistently well. And so I don't know. Again, it's an undrafted free agent. There's not a whole lot to necessarily complain about with a guy whose ceiling was a second round pick, and whose floor was generally, I think the lowest that I've seen it for guys that really killed him on film was a 6th round pick. So to get him as an undrafted free agent and potentially still can look at him as a strong safety of the future, great pickup. Lack of range and coverage, that's really going to be the thing that Robert Saleh and I believe we still have Marquand Manuel as our defensive backs coach, specifically for the safeties. They're really going to have to work with him on that, especially if they want to use him in a more versatile role, being able to see him line up as high safety, or if they just want that possibility, right? If they want to go combo safety and put him out as the 3rd, etc. There's a lot of different ways you can work with it. That is something that you definitely want to make sure he gets better at. Lack of zone coverage instincts, really just the ability to make plays in zone coverage. I don't think he necessarily understands, as we mentioned, a lot of the route concepts, how things are being developed, where he needs to actually focus his attention on to kind of limit big plays as well. All of that is a problem for him, and a lot of it seems like he just kind of gets tunnel vision again, kind of locks in on who he thinks the ball carrier is or who he sees the ball carrier to be, and then he gets after it, and that causes a lot of issues, tying in things like the impatience and stuff that we mentioned. But all in all, again, I mentioned polarizing for a reason. A lot of what you'll see if you dive into him for yourself is that for as many great plays as he's had either the same amount of bad plays, or let's just say like 1.5 to 2 times that amount, right? So obviously not perfect, not a prospect that we're expecting year 1 to go out here and make some noise. I won't even say it's likely he makes the roster in year 1, but he's one of those guys I look at in year 2 that can probably really go out here and make a case for himself. And there were 2 strong pro comparisons I found that should get us excited. 1, Ryan Neal. 2, hits a little bit closer to home because he's a 49ers. Talanoa Hufanga recently got himself an All-Pro and a Pro Bowl, and you would get excited if we hit anything close to that with a guy like Trey Dean. So let me know what your thoughts are, especially if you're Florida fans. Trey Dean III ultimately goes undrafted. I don't think the film and some of the things that were called out are so bad that he should have went undrafted. I'm glad we were able to scoop him up. This is another potential starter for us down the line, which we've had that comparison with a few guys already. So I'm hyped. It'll be interesting to see how this guy develops. We have one of the best DB coaches to do it. And then, of course, in this defense, you trust Robert Saleh and his coaching staff to be able to either scheme and mask some of that stuff, or to be able to just slowly get that development over the course of the season. Much like you've seen with a Tony Adams, a guy that came kind of out of nowhere. We chose him over the likes of Jason Pinnock. And people like the 2-3 games that we got to see him on tape. So hopefully Trey Dean has the same, if not a better arc than what we're getting out of Tony Adams. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts are, and I'll catch you guys again. Peace.